I'm Ray Smith, founder of Bouncin4Checks. Athletes, go to Bouncin4Checks.com and check out the 23 athletes that we covered on Instagram. Also, go to my social media pages and follow us on Instagram at Bouncin4Checks, and also Twitter and Facebook. Hello, I'm Ray Smith. I'm the founder of Bouncin4Checks. My company's mission is to inspire every athlete on the planet to play the sport they love for monetary gain. I'm here with artist Bill Rembert. We worked on a project together called 23, and this project is outlining and talking about 23 different athletes that have had a significant amount of success playing sports and a significant amount of impact on the African American community and just general society. Tell me a little bit about yourself, the artist Bill Rembert, where you're from, who you are, and how you became an artist and a writer.
And I think I'm becoming an artist. I'm from Chicago originally and from the suburbs, and after my 7th grade year I started doing art, but I kept it a secret till after my freshman year of high school. And then when I got out of high school, I went to art school, Art Institute Chicago, for a couple of years, and got out of that and quit doing artwork for a long time, then joined the Army, which was my first love. And then from there, while I was in, I started back doing artwork again. And I did my 20 years, which was my goal, do 20 years in the Army, become a teacher for 20 years. And once I got into teaching, it took me about 8 years where I was able to teach art. And been doing that for the last 8 years. And I feel like I'm in the process right now of becoming an artist. The writing part was a little different. My dad passed away in 2003, and the night that I wrote a poem the first time. So I still don't consider myself a writer, but the writing inspires my artwork. So,
in reference to inspirational modern thought processes and this focus on a purpose-driven life, what makes you a unique person and artist?
I think we're all unique, and because we all go by what we believe. And so for me, I follow my truth, and I don't get stuck in them because I think that changes. What I believe today may change tomorrow with new information. So I'm just somebody that I continually try to grow and learn and find what I feel is real and to adjust it as I go.
Okay. You wrote an ekphrastic poem and painted a piece called 23. What was your inspiration to complete the work?
It's just my dad. My dad married my mom with 6 kids, and we had troubled times in that time, and he kind of made the family solid. And I always felt my dad had issues with accepting his blackness. And so I felt like all the things that he did, all the things he wanted, he achieved. And so I wanted to kind of honor him in some kind of way, and that's what kind of led to the poem, looking at how he inspired us and how can I put something together that talks about what he did for us.
All right, in your poem 23, you wrote about the symbolic meaning of the number 23. And one interesting thing you talked about was the number 23 representing freedom. As an African American artist, how important is freedom to your work?
I think it should be important to everybody. And in America, I felt like we have struggled with understanding what blacks go through in terms of freedom. We look at Israel, and we're all for them having it, but here, right in this country, we still struggle with us having the same thing, and we are American. So it's huge. That's what kind of led to me wanting to address that.
How much do you think freedom has helped the quality of your artwork?
Tremendously, because as an artist, your art is often controlled, and for you to have the freedom to express whatever you want, I think is huge. And so as I go forward, that's what I look for. That's just kind of why I decided I'm going to do my life in 3 stages. And in the next stage, I'll be retired, and I can make whatever I want, and I can express whatever I want. And I think that helps me be more creative.
Okay. Each parent contributes 23 chromosomes to their offspring to create a human life. Do you think children are destined to be identical or somewhat the same as their parents?
No. The 23, and I hit that because it talks about the oneness. It takes both sides to help raise. Again, my stepdad, he wasn't my biological dad, but he had a huge part in us being who we are because of his presence. And I think that's what I'm kind of hitting on when I say the 23 chromosomes. That's the beginning of life, but it's the oneness that creates life.
Shaq and LeBron, their sons both play basketball. Is there any correlation there in your mind between the two, their parents playing basketball professionally and maybe an innate desire to
them
play?
Being successful?
Yes.
Other than size, the genetic things that you can't give a child, I think the biggest part of is how they are raised. Because there's a lot of big people that can't play basketball. There's people who can draw but are not good artists. So it takes a development, and that part is more important. And that's where you have that parental guidance. I think is huge.
Michael Jordan wore the number 23 for most of his professional basketball career. What would you say to young athletes that wear the number, considering Michael Jordan's success?
Look at why was he successful. Everybody wanted to be like Mike and talk trash like Mike, but Mike worked hard. That's where Kobe took it to another level, because there was a lot of pro basketball players that wanted to be like Mike, but I think he was the only one that achieved that, because he took his work ethic and drive, and took that to another level. So if you want to be like Mike, that's the part that you should apply.
Take us inside of your mind and through the concepts in the poem. What were you thinking as you conceptualized about the poem and the artwork?
The poem and the artwork. I wrote down some things I thought about. The biggest thing was how sports played such a big part in black males' lives. That was the number one thing. And then I started looking at the different artists and how they lived and what impact did they have on us. Either then, like a Kurt Floyd, he started a free agency. He didn't get to benefit from free agency, but him taking a step out led to it. And so each one of these artists had an impact on us in some ways in the sports arena, and other ways just in general in life.
Why did you choose a group of athletes? Was there a specific criterion that you used to make the list of 23?
I had to look at their impact. There was a couple that I cut, but I said no. I didn't want to look at the negative for each other. I wanted to look at the positive and on the bigger picture. What are we going through today where these athletes could represent a life that accepted that challenge? Like if you, Allen Iverson, he when I said the script part, he spoke his mind. He had his own image, and he wasn't afraid to be himself. I think that's something we need to look at today. So each one of the artists did something that I felt we can draw on from today.
Bill, I appreciate you coming by. We'll talk to you next time. Look forward to another project with you.
All right, thank you. I'm Bill Rembert, the artist. You can go to my website. It's called A Soldier's Story, and it's at www.wbrembert.info. I'm also on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. It'll be easy to find me. Thank you.
Just interesting having these conversations amongst ourselves, talking about African American history, and when we met, it was interesting to hear your perspective. You really had inspirational moments with me there, man, when we went to San Diego on the leadership conference. But we got to talking about things about the African American community and how our history is not written anywhere for us, especially not being in public schools, which most of us, you know, are in public schools. When I went to school, you know, we didn't have African American history classes and things of that nature. So I really took it upon myself to watch documentaries. One notable one, Hidden Colors, to kind of find out, who I am, where I came from, because we don't belong to America, and really don't belong to Africa. We're African American, so knowing our history, African history, and also knowing our African American history is important. Yeah. This work really inspired me. This 23 athletes, and forced me to read even more on African American history and realize that some of the struggles that the athletes that you talked about actually went through the same struggles that I went through.
Right.
So that's motivational and inspirational to me.
Still, but we are as American as apple pie, and that's where we will always exchange these stories. It was nice. I'm 60, and I definitely didn't get any Black history at all, and I kind of fell upon it because my daughter, when she was 8, we left the Chicago area, moved to Tennessee, Kentucky. She went from liking Tevin Campbell, who was a 12-year-old R&B singer, to singing Icky Bricky Heart and liking Billy Ray Cyrus. And I told her just for that she had to watch BET every night. But I told her, I'm just playing. I don't care who you love, as long as they take care of you. I said, but be proud of who you are. And from there, I started getting her a lot of Black history books and realized I knew nothing. So in February of '96, I started reading a book a month. And I started with the Bible. And I kept adding, and that kind of what led to the writing. But I said, wow, this is such a rich history. Everybody should be reading this. I mean, not just inspiring Black people, just people in general. So your stories and what we used to go back and forth and share, just added more. Every time you said something, I went back and I researched it and read up on something else. I thought, wow, we should be having this in the classroom.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the classroom, it's kind of dejecting watching, people in the classroom, being an educator, watching kids, African American kids, not respect education and not realize that, this is an opportunity that at one point during our history, we didn't have an opportunity to take advantage of, being in education or being in the classroom or being in the same...
Or hearing these stories.
Yeah, absolutely. Hearing these stories or being in the same area, being able to use the same water fountains. And there's a divide there with our history. And I think that if our kids knew the divide existed and where it really came from, I think people talk about it all the time, well, in the 1960s and 1950s and 40s, we couldn't use the same water fountains and all that stuff. It's kind of taken for granted. And, I feel like, Dr. Martin Luther King's work and his life and death and Brother Malcolm and all the people, even just the people that were activists, that I feel like we hold a social responsibility to make that legacy live on.
Yeah, well, whoever controls the narrative controls the story.
Yeah.
I mean, we think the Black Panthers was something bad, and they weren't. And it's kind of sad. You talked about Dr. King. I had students thought that Dr. King freed the slaves. And I thought, wow.
I had a professor tell me that when he was growing up as a Caucasian American, they thought that Martin Luther King was a terrorist.
Yes.
Dr. Martin Luther King, one of the nicest people you probably ever meet.
Yes.
And always fighting for his civil rights. They thought he was an actual terrorist.
Yes. I did a painting of him and I called him radical. And it was radical just to preach love. So, yes. And I'm probably more disappointed that Black Americans, young Black Americans, are not looking backwards, and using it.
And I think our educational system, we don't provide the opportunities for African American kids to look back. So, I feel like artists, people that have the resources and the wherewithal to use what they've gained from society and from the world, need to use that to try to create things within the community where we can be educated on our Black history.
Yeah, but we used to tell our own history, and that was hugely important. We didn't wait for it to be told to us. Then when we quit telling that story, and now we used to get it from our music. Now the music is controlled where you're not hearing those things. So it's really upon ourselves to get that and to share that. We can't wait for someone to give it to us, because it's not being hidden. It's right there. So, I always encourage them, why don't you look back a little bit? That term Sankofa Meaning, you look back to go forward. You take those nuggets from the past to look ahead. And I think that says that I think we've been deadened down to not look at the truths.